Hello, my name's Jonathan Swift. I'm the Content Director at Info Digital's Insurance Division, and today I'm joined by Public Relations Consultant Mark Bishop and Certus Communications Director Ben Welsh for the first of what will be a series of COVID casts, delving into some of the insurance issues while we are all in lockdown. Today we're going to start with one of the issues which has probably been front and centre of the insurance market at the moment, and that is the reputation. I know that David Worsfold, the esteemed writer, called the insurance industry's response leaden-footed, clumsy and seemingly divorced from the grim realities many policyholders are grappling with. So, first question, I'll come to you, Mark. How do you think the insurance industry is currently doing in terms of managing its reputation so far?
Well, to quote one national newspaper journalist, the public response from the industry has been atrocious, and that was a very worrying development. I think it's regrettable that at a time such as we're living in today, that the insurance industry isn't seen as being part of the financial solution to the coronavirus, and in fact is being seen as perhaps part of the problem. So that's a shame, and not a place I think the insurance industry should be in.
Ben?
Yeah, I agree with Mark. The industry is in the eye of the storm, in the court of public opinion. On the one hand, they're caught between the threats of their solvency positions from COVID-19, and on the other, there's a crisis of trust where the public are concerned because they're perceiving that insurers are wriggling out of paying their claims. And of course, it's not about logic. The technicalities of what is and isn't covered in a policy are lost on hundreds of thousands of business owners who faced with the potential loss of their business are asking their brokers, well, why do I pay insurance if not for this? What's insurance for if not for this? I think the other sort of observation I'd make is that insurers have in the past been very proactive in saying to the public that their job is there, they are there to pay claims. In fact, one major insurer, who I won't name, made a virtue out of this a couple of years ago with a campaign saying that it paid out 99% of claims. But in the wake of COVID-19, the public now perceives that, rightly or wrongly, the insurance industry speaks out of the side of its mouth. And that is a great shame for myself, and indeed for Mark, I know, and you, Jonathan, who've worked in the industry for many, many years.
Which I suppose brings the important question: what could and should it have done better? And I'll come to you on that first, Ben.
Well, I think the industry has a problem with its tin ear. The language used to defend its position, especially in the early days of the crisis, in my view, lacked empathy for customers. And it's not the first time that the industry has failed to read the public mood. What could it have done better? If I had £1 for every time an insurer said it wanted policy wordings to be written in plain English, I'd now be self-isolating on my Caribbean island, probably with Richard Branson as my next door neighbour. So, clear wordings, actively checking that the policyholder understands what they're covered for, must be properly and finally sorted out. I think the industry also needs to change its mindset with regard to customer communications generally. I can't think of another industry that avoids communicating with its customers so much, except at renewal. And there was some research done by Consumer Intelligence last month, which found that insurance companies were ranked last at customer communications during the crisis. Only 35% of people had heard from them. Fast food companies scored 62, and gyms scored 56, and supermarkets were the best communicators. I mean, insurers perhaps keep quiet because they don't want to trigger customers cancelling their policies. But that, for me, is a wrong-headed approach. And right now, in the midst of the crisis, customers want to hear from their insurers and their brokers, and I think we should all step up to the plate and do it better.
Mark?
Well, I wonder what goes on at industry level, really, when it comes to how the various players respond in a crisis scenario. We know that all of the big organisations in the industry will have scenario tested their crisis plans. I wonder whether this happens at an industry level so that all of the parties concerned know exactly what's expected of them and how they're going to communicate with the various stakeholders in a crisis scenario. You know, the warnings were out there. The World Health Organization back in 2016 did warn us that, you know, there could be a SARS-related coronavirus, which would have a significant impact. So it's not as though this is actually something which has come completely out of the blue. So I think that, you know, clearly the trade bodies, insurers, brokers can work more effectively together in these kinds of scenarios. And I do think, quite understandably, you know, insurers and brokers, when they're thinking about their marketing plans, when they're thinking about their communication, will be thinking about their own organisations. And so I say that's perfectly understandable. But I do think there has to be a concerted effort, probably centrally led, for the players in the industry to start to communicate about all the good that does go on in the insurance industry. And we know that unless we talk about it, it's not going to be talked about by the media, because they just simply see it as us doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're paid premiums, we're supposed to pay claims, and that's absolutely right. So there has to be more of an effort made to talk up the insurance industry, as well as individual organisations talking up their products and services.
And can I ask you, Mark, I mean, you've already mentioned it there about the possibility of, like, you know, I suppose the ABI and BIBA and the lights getting together. Do you think this is not a lost situation and the industry could win back some trust?
Yeah, I look, the whole trust situation, it's not totally broken. Of course, there's the opportunity to win back trust. But as I say, the problem is that when the industry does the right thing, and it does an awful lot of good in society, we all know that. Everybody who works in the insurance industry sees the figures, the numbers, the pound notes that leave the industry and go to our customers when they need us. So we all know that happens, but it's lost on the general public. So that the headlines are always about when the insurance industry is not seen to be doing what the public expects it to do. It's that old cliche of quick to take the premium, slow to pay the claim. And unfortunately, far too many people believe that to be the case. Now, you can't just leave this as a problem for the trade bodies to sort out. It's a matter for everyone who cares about this industry and is financially dependent upon it to get together and say, look, we need to collectively do something about this. We've got lots of communication channels out there, traditional media, social media. We could be doing a lot more as an industry, I think. We complain about it year on year. I've been to more conferences than I can name where the issue of the industry's reputation has come up. And yet we still find ourselves, after debating this time after time, in a position where, once again, the reputation of the industry is being trampled on.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, what Mark says is terribly depressing for those of us who've been part of the industry and who love it dearly for many, many years. You know, and behind the scenes and during this crisis, I know that there've been Herculean efforts made by my broking clients, for example, to move their operations to remote working. What they've done has been incredible. The business of insurance has to continue, sales, renewals, and account servicing. And to win back trust, that needs to be a priority. But I think to do so also means that insurers and supplier companies agree to be much more flexible in the way they go about their business and make some quite significant changes to their usual modus operandi to, for example, pay claims and make sure that the customer is treated fairly during this very challenging time. That means, you know, to stop doing things that have always been taken for granted, so traditional business practices, and to really proactively think about new ways of doing things using technology to smooth the process of paying claims. And that means operating in a consensual and cooperative way across the industry, because we all share the same customers. I think one thing the insurers shouldn't be doing is taking advantage of the crisis by pushing through rate. There are persistent market rumours that insurers are putting rate through most classes. And I think that's plain wrong, because the risk is that they'll be seen to be profiteering from the crisis. And that would be an unmitigated disaster. I mean, let's remember that in 2008, 2009, during the GFC, the banks were in the firing line. and they got an absolute pasting from the general public for the way they put profit before ethics. And now in 2020, it's potentially the turn of the insurers to get the same kicking as the banks did in 2009. So please, insurers, be very, very careful not to be putting through rate increases at this present point in time. I think that would be a huge shame and could cause reputational damage that would be very, very hard to fix.
Okay, just obviously that was my cat just came into view. Then that was Eli.
That'll go viral.
Just to lighten the mood. Can I ask you, gentlemen? Obviously, we're in lockdown. What are you missing most at the moment? I'll come to you, Mark. What are you missing most?
Going to live events, definitely. I'm missing that. I was due to go to Dublin a couple of weekends back to watch some rugby. Obviously, I couldn't go to that, and I was going to see Ricky Gervais in concert in Brighton, and of course that was cancelled. So that's deeply regrettable. But the one good thing is that I'm actually taking the opportunity to learn to play the guitar, so I can have remote lessons doing that. I would say progress is patchy. I don't think Eric Clapton's got too much to worry about in the foreseeable future, and you know the rheumatism in the hands doesn't help when it comes to hitting some of those chords. But look, I'm going to carry on, and you know I'd be delighted to serenade you guys at some point in the future.
I'll say British Insurance Awards. You know, who knows? We need a headline act.
Who knows?
Fight to get a ticket, eh, Swifty?
Yeah. And Ben, what are you missing at the moment?
I'm obviously missing Mark's guitar playing, but apart from that, I think the two things for me really. The first is sort of the whole thing about personal freedom. The things we take for granted have just been taken away. You know, we can't just go out and do what we want anymore. It's a bit like, I suspect, living in North Korea, where everything is subject to control, and I really hate that. Being somebody who is a strong believer in personal freedoms, I think the other thing I would say is that the lockdown period where I live in West London, most people are respecting it and doing a good job. I think looking ahead, though, when the lockdown period ends and we come out of it, I think it's going to be very distressing to, for example, decide that I want to go down to the pub and have a pint and find that the pub's closed and not likely to open anytime soon. That people who have been off work, either because they've been furloughed or because they've been fired from their jobs, whatever it might be, want to go back to work and can't because there aren't the jobs there to go back to. The economy is taking an absolute pasting from this. I think Times called it at £2.5 billion a day it's costing. And the prospect for us returning to a normal life after this, I would question. I would deeply question. I think this has created some very significant changes in the way we as a society will function and operate. For example, going abroad will no longer be the case of jumping on an airplane and going. There'll be visa restrictions from certain countries. You won't be allowed to go there. All these things are yet to come upon us, and I'm very worried at the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the things that we currently take for granted.
Yeah, so I was speaking to a risk consultant, and he said it's very easy to shut places down. It's much harder to open them up again. So I think that tags into what you're saying there, Ben.
I think a lot of organisations will be looking now and seeing their offices that are empty and with their workers working remotely and question now, where does this large building that we're paying an awful lot of money to run, how does this now fit into the future when we know that we can work pretty successfully by having our employees working from home? I mean, it's inevitable that particularly large companies, I think, will look and think, well, how much does this building cost us to run every year? And we can slice quite dramatic amounts off that cost if we just get more people working from home. So I think this will herald some changes. I'm relatively positive about how life will be after we come out of isolation, and I do think life will return to reasonably something reasonably close to normality. But I don't think anybody knows, and until we do emerge, and what that emerging process will look like, we don't know. But hopefully it will be as soon as possible, because it's a difficult life to lead, being stuck indoors, going out once a day or twice a day to have some exercise and doing some shopping, and not meeting friends, not meeting family. There really is no substitute for face-to-face communication. Video can only go so far. So yeah, I'm hoping for as swift as possible return to normal.
Well, gentlemen, I look forward to sharing the pint with you when the lockdown ends and we can find a pub that is open in Central.
Oh, that sounds good, doesn't it?
Excellent. There must be one open somewhere, Jonathan.
Yeah, surely in the city. All right, gentlemen. Well, thanks very much. And
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Stay well.
Cheers. Bye.